Hello and welcome to this Thursday's morning market briefing. We've got lots to talk about, but firstly, the US House votes through bill to ban TikTok. As well as that, a Georgia judge tosses out some charges in Donald Trump's election meddling case. We've got lots to talk about in the charts. Also, with lots happening on the economic calendar, which we'll come to near the end, so make sure you stay around so you can see that. Before we get straight into it, though, make sure to subscribe. But the first article to talk about, of course, is on the topic of the US House. Now, the House of Representatives have now voted overwhelmingly to ban TikTok. This comes following a bill setting out that if its Chinese owner does not divest ownership of the video sharing platform, app stores in the US will ban its distribution. Now, this, of course, is a very, very important article to note. Not only for the fact that it will affect, the well-known company now of TikTok greatly, but also it shows a greater interest of the US kind of political system, of Congress itself, to start meddling with, app stores, with companies, international companies, more importantly, and basically protecting US national interests above kind of the economic scope of things. So, what we are kind of talking about here is geopolitics once again affecting the economy in many ways, with the key issue with TikTok and its current, ownership, is that basically it's owned by a Chinese parent company, which is causing a great deal of national security concerns for Congress. And we do know that certain US security intelligence officials have recently been briefing, in classified briefings, have been briefing the US House, basically, the lawmakers within the House, on the certain national security threats that the current ownership of TikTok does pose to the US. And this is kind of a repeated issue for the US in regards to TikTok. We know that back under Donald Trump's leadership, we had a similar thing kind of happen, and there was kind of a similar debate on this matter where individuals were greatly worried about the way that China was meddling with TikTok. We do know that, of course, TikTok does have a great deal of access to one's kind of account and data, and that became a great deal of worries for Congress, and as well as that, having that ownership under China, where we do know there's kind of that state capitalism system where the CCP will have a greater access to something like TikTok than maybe the US Congress does for Facebook. That kind of link of data and the issues that's kind of growing in regards to geopolitics and the relations between both the US and China does make this a very, very important issue. And that's why we are now seeing the US House take action. I mean, TikTok, it's a growing platform. It's growing in the industry of short form content. We've seen the likes of, Instagram and YouTube also try and do a similar thing in response to, where TikTok has found its marketplace. But ultimately, we haven't seen such platforms rise to the level that TikTok is has been able to rise to, and as a result of these national security concerns, as a result of TikTok growing, we did see, of course, I believe, some certain TikTok officials testify within Congress, and basically answer questions of lawmakers not too long ago on what were the kind of security breaches that TikTok had taken place with, or what data does TikTok basically have access to. We didn't see much come of that, however, but now we are kind of seeing this bill come through, which is very much going to shut down TikTok should TikTok not hand over ownership to the US, basically to a US company or that kind of thing. Now, this will be very interesting then to see whether this does end up going through within the Senate, as if it does go through, not only will this likely shatter US and Chinese trade relations even more, but also I'm sure it's going to affect, the way certain other international corporations look at doing business within the US, as they probably don't want to be extorted if they start setting up business within the US. So, that's something that's also important to note, I think, as many international companies will look at this and think, well, what's the relations between, their country and the US, and will this affect our business there, and that kind of thing. So very interesting topic to note here. Now, the bill saw bipartisan voting, with the Republicans and Democrats voting 352 to 65. Interestingly, this bill is supported by Joe Biden but is opposed by Donald Trump. Now, over recent days, US security and intelligence officials have provided briefings to lawmakers over the national security threats which are posed by allowing the Chinese company ByteDance to own TikTok. So that's a key thing to note, is that there have been these security briefings, but what's very interesting to note is the fact that Donald Trump is opposing this action, when we do know that he's kind of made similar, or has voiced similar concerns before. So I think that's a very interesting thing to note here. And what we could possibly be seeing here is, Donald Trump once again kind of just opposing the matter just for the sake of kind of, opposing Biden. As we do get closer now to, of course, the November 2024 presidential elections, where we do have Donald Trump going head-to-head with Joe Biden, it would make sense that we are now seeing, Donald Trump just oppose this kind of action just because, Joe Biden is approving of it. So very interesting to note. Now, TikTok has since responded to the action by lawmakers, saying that they hope that Congress will realise the impact of such a decision on the US economy and how it will affect 170 million Americans who use TikTok. So as I said before, it's a massive platform within the US itself, and that's why this is kind of becoming a great deal of an issue for the House, it does seem. Now, congressmen and women have responded to the statements made by TikTok simply by noting that they're happy to have the platform remain, only not under Chinese, only not under Chinese ownership, basically. Now, the decision on whether the bill will now go through is now left up to the Senate, and and previously, when a similar effort was made to address the issue, it failed to gain any traction. Now, that said, such a large majority in the House makes the bill far more likely to pass now. The bill will give ByteDance 180 days to divest TikTok before being banned. So very interesting comments to make at the moment in regards to TikTok. Next article to talk about, though, is to do with Georgia and the Donald Trump meddling case. Now, a judge in the state of Georgia has now removed some charges against Donald Trump. This comes amidst a high-profile case against Trump for his alleged meddling in the 2020 presidential election. 6 counts related to the claims that Trump asked Georgia officials to overturn Biden's win have been thrown out. Now, this is certainly not the first time that we've spoken about Donald Trump and his case in Georgia, where we do know, legal action is being taken against Donald Trump for his actions within the 2020 presidential election, where we did see Donald Trump basically, somewhat try to overturn, it does seem, the 2020 presidential election based on the belief that it was a kind of election fraud that had taken place, and that's what we're seeing now play out within the courts. After it was found that there wasn't that election fraud, we are now seeing charges facing Donald Trump in regards to whether that attempt to overturning the presidential election results was indeed unconstitutional and breaking the law. So that's what we're seeing here, and we do know that certain officials that have been prosecuted so far in this case have already kind of pleaded guilty, basically, which is very, very interesting to note, considering, of course, Donald Trump is most certainly not taking that angle and is still claiming that these kind of legal actions against him are kind of a move, of political biases within the courts. So, we know that the US judiciary system is very politicized. It's just whether this case in fact is, but certainly this case will uncover a great deal of evidence in regards to the election fraud and election debate that did take place over the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election. That said, Donald Trump's now going into the next presidential election of 2024 as the front runner. So what will be very interesting to see is whether the charges that still stand against Trump, whether those charges do then affect Trump's efforts to become president once again. Now, the judge did justify his decisions based on there being a lack of sufficient detail regarding the nature of the claims. Trump is facing 13 accounts in total, with one charge alleging that Trump urged Georgia's Secretary of State to decertify the results of the 2020 polls. The judge, however, did make it clear that although he had made the decision to throw out some charges, it by no means meant that the entire indictment is dismissed. The ruling therefore does not affect a critical count underpinning the case, which alleges the violation of Georgia's racketeering statute. The actual trial facing Trump is expected to begin on August 5th, following delays. Of course, we do know that the Trump legal team has made a great deal of effort in delaying these trials, as we do know other trials, as we do know that Trump is also involved in a great deal of other legal trials at the moment over, cases with hush money, as well as, issues to do with fraud in relation to his loans and that kind of thing. So very interesting times for US politics and Donald Trump indeed. So keep your eyes on all these topics and articles. Sorry for the sniffling once again. I still have that cold. That's all to talk about in this article, though. Next article to talk about, of course, is the US. Next thing to talk about, of course, is the charts. We've covered all of the articles, and to begin on the charts, of course, we are on the US 30 to talk about US indices more broadly as a whole. So to begin with, we are on the Dow Jones. Now, some interesting price action on the Dow Jones has played out very recently, and just here we can see how price has broken above that key liquidity and resistance level that we had noted yesterday as an area which price was struggling to break above and was reacting to, and kind of presenting some bearish signals in response to being around that area. That said, we did note how still is a great deal of bullish momentum within the US 30, and so we were kind of expecting price to break above that level, just because we broke above that bearish counter trend line. We're representing a great deal of bullish momentum at the moment, and following a great deal and following more hawkish information and data from the US inflation figure that we got recently. We didn't see much bearish momentum from that, and so that kind of presented a very bullish image for the US 30, which was that basically US equities are not being affected by interest rates as much as we are expecting, and therefore the view on the economy is a far more important one to note. And so we kept that bullish momentum on our mind, and now it does seem like price has broken above. That said, price did also spike down and through and below this key liquidity level. So a great deal of bearish momentum as well is also on the US 30. So keep that on your mind most definitely. Next to talk about though is the dollar, which is in a very interesting position after obviously coming into contact with that 38.20. Which we did note yesterday as an interesting level, since we did see a bullish reaction surprisingly following that inflation figure. Actually, no, that's kind of what we would expect, but what we didn't expect was bearish momentum after we came into contact with that 38.20, like we've seen since Tuesday now. So Very odd price action on the dollar, because one would expect after that kind of inflation figure we would see a great deal of bullish momentum to the upside, but it does seem like there is a great deal of bearish momentum still within the market. So whether we can now break below this liquidity level after coming into contact with that Fibonacci level, that will be the real question to ask and answer. That's what we'll talk about on the dollar, though. Next, talk about, of course, still on the topic of the dollar, of course, is the Euro USD. Not too much to say on the Euro at the moment, simply because price is still kind of stagnating and halting around this key liquidity level. That said, whether price can now break above this level, this liquidity zone, that'll be very interesting to see. As that next level that we've kind of noted that price could run up to is, of course, this level up here. So, very interesting price action on the euro. That said, price is stagnating for the moment. Next to talk about, though, is pound yen, which has had some very clean price action all the way up until very, very recently, basically, with price kind of moving around and reacting to these key liquidity levels quite nicely. That said, over the past few days and week maybe, we have seen price kind of become more choppy. And what we could be seeing here, which is kind of interesting to note, is we're sort of forming a bullish head and shoulders pattern, as price did initially come down and test this liquidity zone, but then did move back up to the upside and test the Fibonacci level and then come back down. But when price did come back down, it failed to meet that minus 27.2% Fibonacci retracement level, as this level was below this liquidity zone, and as a result we have seen price now move back to the upside. What will now be interesting to see, though, is whether price sells off from that area once again, comes back down to around this level, and then continues to the upside. That would be a bullish head and shoulders pattern, and a very interesting piece of price action, as it would kind of note this continuation to the upside, which wouldn't be surprising considering the bullish momentum which has been in the pound yen for quite some time now. Next to talk about, though, is Bitcoin, which is just performing amazingly at the moment, very, very bullish, and price seemingly has now done a break, hook and go kind of movement on Bitcoin after breaking above this all-time high level around 68,500, of course, that we have noted before, and we did note yesterday how price had spiked down into that liquidity level and then come right back up. So we noted how that was kind of the liquidity being tapped right there, and that kind of led us to expect price to now move significantly to the upside, and that is kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing this slow movement to the upside, and now we're nearing that minus 27.2% Fibonacci extension level. So very interesting on Bitcoin, certainly. Next to talk about, though, is gold, which is kind of in an interesting position, because I kind of in my head expected price to at least come down to this minus 23.6% Fibonacci level, break below this previous all-time high level, get that liquidity and then continue higher. That said, price did near that area of liquidity, arguably did go into it somewhat, but ultimately, did not fully kind of tap that liquidity, and is now kind of moved back again to the upside. That said, we're not seeing too much bullish momentum after coming into contact with this liquidity level. So it certainly could be the case that now price continues to sell off to the downside. So definitely keep your eyes on gold at the moment. It's a very interesting price action to note after a great deal of bullish momentum recently. And we've seen the same on Bitcoin, but to see it on gold with this amount of volatility is very surprising indeed. Next to talk about, though, is oil, which has been ranging for quite some time now, since the start of February, and we've kind of just said that price is interacting with these key liquidity zones that we've noted before, but it does now seem like price has broken above and is now likely to continue higher than this liquidity zone. That said, it still hasn't broken above the all-time range high, but the period of where price was kind of ranging in, price has now broken above that. So very interesting situation for oil at the moment. That's all to talk about on the charts, though. Finally, to talk about, of course, is the economic calendar, where we are getting some very significant data today. Not a lot of data, but significant indeed nonetheless. Firstly, we are getting some new Chinese yuan loans. They're being released today, so look out for that. As well as that, we're getting the US producer price inflation figure, and that is the most significant figure of the day. So a very interesting figure to listen out for and note down. Next, talk about the next piece of data that we'll get as well is the US retail sales data, which is also very important. That, of course, gives us a better indication into, inflation trends, consumer behavior, and that kind of thing. So definitely keep your eyes on the US kind of data that we are getting today, because the next piece of data that we're getting is US jobless claims data, followed by US business inventories data. So lots of US data that we're getting today, and one bit of Chinese data that we're getting. That's all to talk about on the economic calendar, though. Listen out for all of that. Very important indeed. That's all to talk about, though, on the articles as well. We've got lots in the articles, lots in the charts, and lots on the economic calendar. Hope you have a great trading day. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Have a great one. See you later. Bye.